Greetings, Highrock. My name is Prashan de Visser. I have the privilege of being a part of this community for many years. First as a college student who came for service every weekend from freshman year to senior year. But then I've had the privilege of coming back and continuing to be mentored by Pastor Dave and being in community with the Highrock community for many, many years. And I've had the privilege of speaking and preaching here many times. So I'm so grateful for the opportunity. And especially the work that I've been doing. From those of you who know, we've been involved in peace building and reconciliation work in Sri Lanka after the end of the civil war. I've really felt after college God calling me to go back home and start a movement for peace, even while the civil war was going on. And it wasn't a popular thing to do at the time, but I remember sharing my heart my last day at church as a college student and said, I think God's calling me to go back home. Many of my friends and other international students decided to stay back and work here or have an OPT visa, at least for 1 year. But I felt it was my calling to head back home. And I remember many of you who were there at the time praying for that journey. And I'm so thankful for all of you who have been part of that story. God's done amazing things. So 2 years into our work, the Civil War ended after 3 decades. We were able to inspire a new generation who dared to unite and dared to pursue a new way of dealing with their problems across communal lines, to have dialogue and non-violently express their grievances and find justice for all by working alongside one another. Sri Lanka Unites has now grown to be the largest peace-building movement in our country with over 30,000 members. We have about 9 offices and centers across the country, about nearly 50 full-time and part-time staff. And it's amazing. We've engaged 1.5 million youth to ensure that this generation doesn't make the same mistakes of the past. And we're still working towards reconciliation, working towards justice. But one of our greatest joys is in Sri Lanka's history, we've always had a cycle of violence every 15 to 18 years. And now we can say that we're slowly overcoming those cycles of violence, and this generation has stood strong. Even in the midst of political turmoil and economic bankruptcy, this generation has chose nonviolent ways of addressing their grievances and finding sustainable solutions. But about 5 to 10 years ago, actually, Sri Lanka United started getting opportunities to engage beyond Sri Lanka. And we are now Global Unites. We have engaged in 14 countries now, and we have staff and teams working in these 14 countries, countries that are recovering from conflict, in the midst of violent conflict, or at the verge of potentially entering into violent conflict. But we're engaging the next generation to make better decisions, and our whole purpose is to inspire, connect, and equip a new generation of leaders and peace builders in these communities. And so Highrock has been a huge part of that journey. Some of you have volunteered, some of you have contributed, some of you have, many of you have been praying for our movement. It is definitely a multi-religious, multi-ethnic movement for youth-led reconciliation and justice and leadership. And today, like I said, 14 countries, and we're glad now that even in Europe, where they're seeing a lot of tensions across because of xenophobia and migrant communities and local communities having tensions, we're being invited to help the process of help that new generation of immigrants and locals have more meaningful engagement, to bring down the temperature and reduce the extremism that's growing that could be a threat. And so we recently just registered as a nonprofit in Germany. So Germany Unites is up and running. We've been receiving invitations in the United Kingdom and many of the European countries. And so we're glad now a concept from the Global South is having an opportunity in these regions as well. And some of you may know, we're also here in the United States. And next year, we're launching our first national conference of college students who are passionate about peace building across racial lines, political ideologies, whatever it may be, of how does the next generation prepare themselves to be better equipped and not make the same mistakes of their parents' generation, to be able to be true bridge builders, to have empathy and engage. So today I wanted to talk to you on those lines of the concept of us as believers, as peacemakers in a highly polarized world. Let me put it like this. Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the peacemakers. They shall be called the children of God." And that's what we're going to talk about today. Blessed are the peacemakers, even in an election year. Whether it's here in the United States or in my country or anywhere in the world, I believe there are over 70 elections in this year. And election season is a time where society gets polarized, where all sorts of animosities come to play. People lose friends over their political decisions. People distance themselves with their own families because of their political ideologies. It becomes tense. And in fact, we've also seen a rise in racism and extremism and hate speech online during an election time. People get so passionate about it to a point that maybe the worst version of ourselves tends to come out during election cycles. So it's very important for us to remember, as people of our faith, people who are following Christ, as Christians, what's our role during this? And what does the Bible really talk to us about that? And that's what I want to engage, because obviously this is something very near and dear to my heart. As a peace builder who's been engaged for nearly 2 decades in this work, I really feel that we, the church, have an important role to play. So one of the things before I get to that, I just wanted to say that when we are engaged through Global Unites in the work that we've been constantly, we say we try to vaccinate a new generation. And the whole vaccination process is almost like vaccinating this generation from one of the greatest viruses that has affected humanity. And that virus is a virus of prejudice, of hate, and then violence. So how do we engage a new generation and vaccinate them so that they're immune to that virus that they inherit from generation to generation? That they have a capacity to see it coming, they see the symptoms, and they're able to take precautionary measures and also have the immunity to stand against it and not make the same mistakes of generations before. And that's very much what we do. And I think it's also important for us as faith communities to vaccinate ourselves against this hate and polarization that is constantly bombarded to us through media, through social media, and we're all figuring out our ideologies, our perspectives, who our candidates are, why we like them, why we don't like them, all of that. But we have to make sure that we are immune to it in the sense that it doesn't become bitterness and hate and animosity and makes us behave in a way unbecoming of children of the living God. And so that's something that we're very, very passionate about, and I feel we have a mandate for this. Now, for me, I go constantly to this verse on the Sermon on the Mount, the most popular sermon Jesus ever preached, I believe his first sermon. And in Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, they shall be called the children of God." They shall be called the children of God. Now, Jesus could have called anyone as the children of God. He talks about blessed are the ones who mourn, are the meek, the ones who are hungry and thirst for righteousness, the merciful, the pure in heart. He could have called any of these groups children of God. But for some reason, he emphasized on peacemakers and said, they are the children of God. There's something in the DNA of a peacemaker that's connected to being a child of God. Now, some of you might say, I thought I was already a child of God when I gave my life to Christ, and what's this all about? I don't know, this is what Jesus is saying. So let's try and say, either children of God, because that's part of their DNA, and by default, engage in the ministry of peacemaking, or when you do engage in peacemaking, it's affirmed that you're a child of God. Regardless, it is a fundamental value for who we are. When I came to the States, one of the things that, especially with US academia, that was very difficult and different for me was this whole concept of electives. Back home when we studied, we had core curriculum. You just did what you were told. You had no options, and it was very almost like a dictatorial academic system. But here in the States, you had electives. They were not very important, but you needed to pick a few electives, but you had your core curriculum, that was what was important. I believe for those of us in the faith, peacemaking is not a Christian elective. It's not an extracurricular activity, but it is co-curriculum. It is fundamental to our beliefs. But we don't really talk about it as much. We don't really see the value of it. But Jesus himself was the Prince of Peace. He spoke of a message that brought communities together. And then he says the children of God will be called, peacemakers will be called children of God. So there's something here. We need to explore this without walking away or dismissing the role that we have to play. Now, especially in the midst of heightened tensions and civil wars and political polarization and racial injustices, we can't walk away and say, I still think it's an elective. No, it's not. It's fundamental to who we are. And so you might say, well, that's an isolated incident. Maybe Jesus said that. Maybe the Sermon on the Mount. Maybe he misspoke. Maybe that was just kind of He was just looking for things that would rhyme and phrases, and he just happened to say peacemakers and children of God. He didn't mean it. Well, we know that Jesus wouldn't make those mistakes, but let's keep looking. Do we have any other evidence to suggest that this responsibility and this way of responding to society is fundamental to who we are? Let's turn to John chapter 17, verse 21. To give some context, this is the final prayer that Jesus prayed before he went to the cross of Calvary. So it's almost like his last will before the death and on the cross. And he prayed for three groups. First, he prayed for himself before the moment of disgraced sacrifice. Second, he prayed for the disciples. And finally, he prayed for you and me. He said the ones who would come to know me through the work of the disciples. So with eternal eyes, he's looking 2,000 years in the future. He sees you, he sees me, and Jesus prays for us. Now, God knows there is a lot of things that we could use prayer for. He could have prayed for a million things over you and me. He could have prayed that we'll be wise. We could have prayed that we'll be just, that we'll be prosperous, we'll be strong evangelist, or he could have prayed for that we'll be prophetic. He could have prayed that we'll be pure and holy. So many things. But Jesus picked one thing and one thing alone to pray for you and me when he was going to the cross, just before the cross. No surprises. This is what he says. That all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. He prayed for one thing and one thing alone. His final wish, his final prayer before the cross, when he thought of you and me, he looked into the future and he said, Lord, may they be one. May there be unity. May the world see them. And then he said, may that be the litmus test for people to know that Jesus was sent by the Father, that Jesus was the Messiah. He was the true Savior of the world. He placed the litmus test for that great truth on the fact that the world will see that we are one. So Satan's strategy throughout history has been very simple, is to divide the church as much as possible so that the world will not see that Jesus was sent by the Father. It's almost like shackles and blinds over the eyes of broader society, because we as the church have failed, not just in the ministry of peacemaking, but living out peace, living out unity within the body of Christ. We have been split apart according to denomination, theological differences, according to race, according to socioeconomic standards. Maybe not openly we won't say these things, but the truth is there is a division. And not just that, sometimes the churches have split based on whether it's choruses or hymns, whether it's pews or chairs, whether it's lighting or somber atmosphere. Multiple trivial things have come in and just split the church over and over and over again, to a point that outsiders have looked at the church and they haven't seen us as one, and therefore they haven't seen that Jesus is the Son of God. So why would Jesus put so much importance to this? For us to be peacemakers and for us to be in peace with one another. Because this is not, once again, an elective. This is fundamental to who we are. And so when we look at the situation, we, the church, have a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to broader society, to be peacemakers in the midst of growing polarization, in the midst of civil wars, in the midst of hate and division. We have a role to play. If not you, who? If not now, when? So let me try and explain that. Do you think the political leaders of our countries would go out of their way to bring about peace and healing and justice? No. Politicians in whatever country benefit from strong social divides because that gives them a strong voting bloc. That's like guaranteed vote. This community will vote for me, because now it's easier. So more often than not, what politicians will do in election year is when they haven't delivered on their promises, all the pledges and manifestos have now not happened, they come back to an election year and they realize the only way to get your emotional commitment and blind loyalty to them is to pitch you against the other, is to create a monster on the other side and say how they will protect you from that monster. And that emotional fear-mongering drive happens whether it's Sri Lankan politics or the West or anywhere else. And unfortunately, many of us fall for it. So if we're looking to the political leadership of our countries to bring about healing, reconciliation, and not pit us against each other, that's not going to happen. So then where do we look? Are we looking to the corporate world? Why would they? Most corporates are working towards the agenda of doing better in business, to expanding their influence in the business world. And they are not going to take the time to try and heal society. They may do it as a project on the side, as a CSR, but that's not what they're driven by. That's not their mandate. That's not their role. That's not their expertise. So then are we going to hope that nonprofits and activists will do that? Unfortunately, the way nonprofits and activists more often than not work, they end up showing the problems and start accusing, this is wrong, this needs to change, that needs to change. That posture hasn't really helped bring about healing and reconciliation. It's exposed the problem, it's analyzed the problem, and it tries to respond to the symptoms of the problem, but does not go to create about sustainable change when it comes to this. So where would we solve these issues? I believe the church has a role to play. Children of God have to play the role of peacemakers in this context. We have to step up, because if you don't, we will see these growing chasms in society will, in the worst case scenario, become violence and the destruction of our societies. At the least case scenario, it'll keep us stagnant and stuck in political deadlock. We see, just ask yourself some of the times you're having heated debates and conversations with your own friends, with your own family. Does it really matter 5 years down the line or even 2 years down the line? Is it worth losing relationships and friendships and lifelong experiences with people, just washing it away for a position that you're taking on politics? Ask that question. People call it the great unfriending or the great blocking that takes place during political times. So many people, sometimes unfriending their own family members, their friends. And you're purifying your social media just so that you hear what your opinion is, and further creating echo chambers. Or only following a certain type of news that now make your position stronger. You're not wanting to hear the other position. And you're almost becoming radicalized and even more bitter and more angry. That's taking your capacity from being the God-given mandate of a peacemaker. Now, every word you utter leads to the possibility of more anger, more division, because you're feeding yourself that. The church and Christians were not asked to follow society. We were asked to set a standard. We were asked to serve and lead, and not just join what the world has done of pitting themselves against each other and attacking each other. As a foreigner, when I looked at the United States, we used to look up to your country for one thing, that it was a vibrant democracy. There was unity in diversity. There was strong, vibrant debate that refined the nation, and everybody respected one another, and they made a decision and stood by it. But over the last 10, 20 years, we have seen a loss of that civility. That vibrant debate has gone away, and now it's just burn after burn, looking to say got you questions and demean the other, look down on the other, and even worse, looking at the other as a threat to your nation. In fact, Pew Research has done this survey that says nearly 50% of Republicans think Democrats are a threat to the nation's democracy and well-being, and around 50% of Democrats think 50% of Democrats think Republicans are a threat to the nation's well-being, and vice versa, both groups. Now, a few years ago, maybe after 9/11, when you talked about a threat to your nation's well-being, you were referring to terrorism or evil actors from around the world. But now you're pointing out to your own countrymen and saying they're a threat to your nation's well-being. This is dangerous territory. I've been working in peace-building work for nearly 2 decades. When that kind of rhetoric becomes commonly used and believed, eventually there are going to be a few individuals who want to neutralize the threat and take matters into their own hands. That's how cycles of violence begin. And so the church can't play into that trap. We have to start seeing this is not the way to deal with our problems. How do we have vibrant debate? How do we engage? So we have been asked to pursue this work of peacemaking towards reconciliation. And let me tell you, For me, one of the most profound understandings of what are we pursuing, what's our end game here, we want to see reconciliation in our societies. The word that we use and we follow is in Hebrew, it's called tikkun olam. Tikkun olam in English means reconciliation, but there are three English words that need to come together and work together in order for reconciliation to be complete. And the three English words are heal, repair, transform. One of these three taking place is not reconciliation. Even two out of the three is not reconciliation. I believe these three need to work in tandem to really see meaningful peace and justice. The whole notion of shalom comes that. When we talk about reconciliation, it's not a restoration of a former relationship, because your country's history and my country's histories, our former relationships are no better. But we're trying to restore a right relationship in our society. So when we say heal, it's acknowledging the hurt that we have caused one another. Acknowledge the hurt that we are experiencing and saying this cannot continue to go on. And therefore, you're asking for forgiveness and you're asking for healing from one another. Kind of like hugging it out in a deep, authentic way. But that alone is not reconciliation. That's an important first step. But then we need to move on to the work of repair. Repairing the broken structures in our society that create new wounds and open old wounds. If we don't work together for a just society, for a society where those brokenness are addressed and corrected, our hugging it out is going to be a very temporary solution, and the wounds would continue. So those of us in the faith have this important journey of taking society to correct the brokenness in our society. What are broken institutions and structures and things in our society? Without politicizing it, this is wrong. We need to correct this. How can we work together to correct it? Then there is deeper healing. Then there is a thriving of society. And finally, transformation. And when we talk about transformation, it's about building something better than what was, a new shared vision for the future, for a just and thriving future for our children. And we're working towards that. That's the work of a peacemaker. We're trying to restore society to a right relationship. That alone is a full-time job. We can't afford to take a diverted course and join the polarization, join the animosity, contribute to that, and still come and do this work. Because we're tainting our capacity to be gifted in the work of peacemaking. So during this election season, I know you may have a lot of ideas and a lot of opinions. But ask yourself, what is my role here? Because candidates will come and go. Some candidates may appear to be like heroes today and may be traitors tomorrow. But our identity in Christ, our responsibility to faithful to Him, is not going to go anywhere. That's what we're going to be measured at the end. On Judgment Day, we're not going to be judged by how effective we were for our party and how effective we were to stand for a certain cause that a politician said that was righteous. But it's going to be how effective are we in being faithful to God's call on our life. Let's be healers in a society. Let's be bridge builders in a society. Because our nation needs it, and no one else is in the business of doing it. This is who we are as the church. So as I close, I want to share 3 suggestions. And I also have my book out, Peacemakers in a Polarized World. It's a devotional, and I'm talking about 7 to 8 steps that average, ordinary people can do to be peacemakers with a biblical foundation on how that can be done. I just want to share 3 things very quickly. If you truly want to be a peacemaker, one component is we have to enhance our capacity to empathize with the other. George McGovern says, empathy is born out of the biblical virtue that love thy neighbor as thyself. Empathy sets the stage for action and response. It prepares the heart and mind with the much needed motivation to see why we need to care, respond, and be part of the solution for our brother and sister's need. It also says empathy communicates that someone else's perspective, pain, aspirations, story is as important as yours. Thus helps us become stronger in the ministry of peacemaking. Do we have the capacity to empathize? Sometimes we're so obsessed with our opinion, our issues, what burdens us, that we've lost the capacity to try and understand the other. Do we have the capacity to sit and listen, Not just hear what they're saying, but feel, where is this coming from? Why is this important to them? When you build your capacity to empathize, you're building your capacity as a peacemaker. You're not listening to the person trying to find ways to hit back, trying to find holes in their arguments, trying to destroy their position, trying to devastate their mind to be confused. What you're trying to see is understand, where are they coming from? Why are they coming to that conclusion? And try to see the person and not the position. Try to see their situation and not an opportunistic opportunity to destroy them. Secondly, we have to build our posture of humility. Psalms 139, verse 23, David prays this beautiful prayer. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. This is the King of Israel. This is a man who was after God's heart. And if we are to emulate him, he daily prayed this prayer of saying, Lord, search me. Before I judge everybody else, I may be king, I may be in power, I may have all authority, but Lord, you are the King of kings and the Lord of lords. Lord, what do you think about me? I may think I'm a great person, but Lord, what do you think about me? Search my heart. If there's arrogance, bitterness, and condescension within me, Lord, expose it and help me to change my ways. Don't let me walk every day feeling self-righteous and telling everybody that they're wrong and my position's right. But give me that posture of humility, so when I even speak truth, it comes out of a place of humility. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, it says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. Can you believe it? God is asking us to value others above ourselves. And so when you value others above yourself, there is a posture of humility. You're not posturing yourselves over them. You're not condescending. And just that posture helps you connect with people and be a bridge for healing and deeper relationships that goes beyond an election cycle. And finally, meaningful, authentic, vibrant integration. Our societies are way too polarized and segregated. Even in social media, like I said before, we only have friends who believe and say exactly what we say. We only follow news outlets and political commentators who say what we want them to say. And we only associate with people who say what we believe. We only go to church or do community with people who just say exactly what we believe. So we've segregated ourselves and created these echo chambers that have taken our capacity to understand where the other comes from, taken up opportunities to truly empathize with the other, or even have a posture of humility. Why do you have a posture of humility around people who just think like you? And so we've lost that crucial opportunity to be the salt of the earth because we've removed ourselves. And so ask yourself the question, have you segregated yourself? Because peacemakers can't afford to be segregated. We have to be right there where it matters and help bring society together. I constantly ask this question, please write down 10 of your closest friends, 10 friends that you would invite to your children's wedding. And then I ask the question, how many of them are from a different race to you? How many of them tend to vote differently to you? How many of them are from a different socioeconomic class than you? How many of them maybe are even from a different community or religion from you? If the answers for you is that you have no intersection, that all 10 people are people who look like you, talk like you, vote like you, act like you, you're reducing your capacity to be a peacemaker. You're losing great opportunity to have deep relationships with communities, to enhance your ability to understand different people from different walks of life, and to engage with them with love, an unconditional love. Every time you're getting annoyed and angry at somebody, I want you to remember that the same precious blood that Jesus shed on the cross of Calvary for them, for you, he shed for them as well. The same blood, the same Savior. So let's not lose our commitment to one another, because Jesus was committed to all of us. So engage vibrantly, authentically, Not just like a resume saying, hey, my friend list is diverse. No, just I really do life with these people. I'm learning how to bring society together. This is not easy work. I sometimes think that peace building is like laying yourself on the floor and helping people walk over you like a bridge to connect with the other. Sometimes it's painful to bring society together. Sometimes you become the bad guy trying to be there and help people see each other's perspective. But that's our joy and privilege and cross to bear in the midst of these turbulent, divisive times. Let's be known as people who refuse to join the status quo of attacking and polarizing, but stand in response to the final will of Christ before the cross of Calvary. Let's be one as a community, and let's be peacemakers for our nation and our world. May God bless you.